Good day, mate. My name is Mordecai, and welcome back to the show, where a relatively inexperienced roleplayer narrates various RPG-related stories as a learning tool. Something that a new player to tabletop role-playing games might be encouraged to do is to get behind the Dungeon Master screen and to run their own campaign. And this does sound like a rather fun idea on the surface, since you can explore the lore of Dungeons & Dragons, and even be able to add some homebrew elements to spice up the setting. It can also further develop an appreciation for those that run long-term campaigns. And if you don't want to run a full campaign or are just simply starting out, you can run what's called a one-shot, which is a shorthand for a miniature campaign done in a single session. Regardless of which is being run, plenty of fun can be had at the table. So it brings me no pleasure to now have to talk about some of the potential issues that can happen to someone who is behind the DM screen. Because when a person is running a game for a group, especially one that may not necessarily be in person, the group's various members can be something of a wildcard on occasion. You do thankfully run into a lot of good players, but sometimes a brand new Dungeon Master will have an encounter with that guy. And today's story contains a particularly sadistic that guy as a problem player. Before we get started with the narration, if you like my content and want to see more of it, be sure to subscribe and like the video. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Enjoy! Let's delve into the often terrifying world of r/RPG horror stories. Today's story is titled Problem Player Makes Me Question DMing Again, and is written by NoobNoo7. I enjoy listening to these stories from Crow's Perch and Crit Crab, so I thought I would drop my own story that discouraged me from DMing. I apologize for any spelling or grammatical errors that occur throughout the story. When the pandemic first started, I started watching D&D streams on night shifts. I ended up falling in love with the game, and found myself wanting to play. I found a local grocery store, and learned the game firsthand. A number of months later, and I thought I was ready to give it a go at DMing. At this point, I had only played one-shots, and had never been in a full campaign. I was rather oblivious to the that guy tropes that I see in videos. I decided that I was going to run a virtual Discord one-shot for anyone that volunteered, on a D&D related Discord server. Upon arriving at the game, I had my notes, and whilst I was nervous to run the game, everyone else seemed really excited. I started my one-shot with the standard trope of waking up in a tavern and having the players introduce themselves to each other. We had a Yuan Ti Archfey Warlock, which we'll refer to as the problem player, which I'm going to name Pete because why not? And the other player I remember who created a Luxodon Barbarian. We'll call him Fant. Unfortunately, I can't remember the other player characters. Pete was very standoffish from the group. He had a rather brooding quality at first, but at the same time, he would cut the other players off to talk about what his character was doing. Examples included Fant playing a tiny instrument, and everyone was laughing. Pete pulled out an instrument, and was playing it better. The group is talking to an NPC, and Pete wanted to be the primary group leader to correspond with the NPC. He didn't really want to give the others a chance to roleplay. The main quest-giving NPC described to the group that they needed to exchange a bag of coins for a dragon egg at a specific location. Nothing could go wrong. I was able to overlook the red flags from Pete up until this point. The biggest problem I had came when the group was discussing the best way to approach the exchange of the goods. Pete had an idea that the group didn't really care for, and as a result, he said that he would cast Fey Presence with a DC 16 Wisdom save on Fant to get him to agree with his point of view. Now, looking back, I should have stopped this. I don't believe in taking someone else's character's actions away from them. I also didn't have the rules up in front of me, and I was still so new that I trusted them and just sort of rolled with it. Fant seemed okay with it, but it did seem just a little overpowered. I was fairly new, non-confrontational, and didn't want to challenge them because I was unsure. And so the group proceeded with Pete's plan, and this wound up resulting in combat. Let's pause the story for a moment. There are a large number of what's referred to as red flags that indicate when a player at the table is not a positive influence on the game, both inside of it and out of it. And whilst I can see the debate on what should be considered a red flag being dependent on what is acceptable on a per-table basis, one area that I cannot debate on is that these red flags always cause a problem, either for the players, or for the Dungeon Master, or for both of those parties. In this story so far, we have our problem player Pete effectively taking over as the party's leader, without the party's general consent, cutting over the rest of the party in their roleplay, and blatant power gaming through manipulating a first-time Dungeon Master. And any of these three red flags are a sign of a bad player. Let's resume the story, and see how many more red flags Pete waves in front of the Dungeon Master. At this point, I noticed a bit of a trend. Pete never rolled below an 18, even as a level 1. He had at least 6 natural 20s throughout the entire session, and claimed he was just lucky. Again, to reiterate, we were playing on Discord, and he said he was rolling dice at his house. I had no issues with the other party members, just him. And during combat, Pete kept rolling damage that just didn't seem to make any sense for his level. Additionally, Pete claimed that he has the ability to attack with a spear and pin the enemies to the wall so that they couldn't do anything. He was one-tapping all of the enemies that I threw at him, so I had to try to beef them up on the spot. In the end, I ended up giving the party a tough fight, but they eventually won. They retrieved the dragon egg and headed back. On the way back to town, Pete was upset that Fant was carrying the dragon egg, and demanded that Fant give it to him. Once Fant declined, Pete said that he was once again using his Fey presence to once again force Fant to just give it to him. And, I quote, "Get Fant to do anything I tell him to do." Once they got back to town, I was mentally done with the one-shot. I was burned out from dealing with Pete, and I felt like I shouldn't be a DM ever again. At least until I learned the rules a little bit better. I just felt that it wasn't fair to rob players of their characters' actions. I have since looked up the rules and determined that Pete had lied to me about a number of things. I felt strongly discouraged, and I haven't DM'd since this incident, and it's been 2 years at this point. One day, I do fully intend to return, but it will have to be for the right group. In summary, the first time I tried DMing, I ran into a problem player that fudged rolls, forced teammates to do what he wanted them to do, and had a severe case of main character syndrome. And as a result, I gave up on the prospect of DMing for a while. And that's the end of the story. Well, I think we can all be reasonably confident that we can add cheating to the list of Pete's offences in this horror story. If Pete, the problem player, wanted to so badly play a powerful main character, I think it would have been highly preferable to find either a Dungeon Master who is happy doing a one-on-one campaign, or else finding a group with similar interests in running a power fantasy of that caliber. But something tells me that players like Pete would be much happier writing down their intended power fantasies in a book. Or, if they're not happy about having to write it down in a book, they should at the very least keep their more anti-table behaviour away from the table, and that would at the very least then be commendable. And for a first-time Dungeon Master, it can be highly discouraging to have that guy behaving like this at the table. So, here's to our original poster. May you someday find the right group to DM for in the future. And for me, the lessons an inexperienced roleplayer such as myself can learn from this: remember, be respectful to your fellow players, and especially the Dungeon Master. After all, without the Dungeon Master, you won't really be able to play the game. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe and leave a like. It's free to do, and you can change your mind later. If you have any thoughts on this story or feedback on how it can improve, feel free to leave a comment. Again, thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you all next time. Okay, so that's all done. I'm just gonna wrap up here and leave this here. I'm sure that the Institute will have no problem cleaning all of this up.
Mordecai, you fool. You shall rue the day you used my name for a problem player in the guise of a nice guy.